Okay, so today we're going to be looking at some of Steinbeck's stylistic strategies that he uses throughout this piece. And what I'm drawing on in particular is some of the stuff from chapter 3, pages 39 to 55. So in chapter 3, we've got George confiding in Slim that they had to leave weed because of Lenny's behaviour. In this chapter, Candy's dog is shot. The dream starts to grow. It starts to become potentially possible. Remember that Candy says he's got some money stashed away that he could contribute to the dream. So all of a sudden, it's kind of within reach. Curly barges in looking for his wife, fights with Lenny and gets his hand crushed. So we're looking particularly at the stylistic choices, how Steinbeck is creating tension, how he's foreshadowing the oncoming doom that's going to happen within this book. So, what new information does the reader learn about here? We learn more about the nature of George and Lenny's relationship. Those of you who are writing, a few of you have intimated to me that you're writing about George choosing to kill Lenny or the aftermath of him killing Lenny. Go back to chapter 3 and read George telling Slim about his relationship with Lenny, because that'll give you some really good insight. We learn a bit more about Lenny and the scary nature of his strength, the fact that he's the one in that backstory with George talking to Slim. We learn about his intellectual disability, and we've got the scene with Curly just simply getting his hand crushed. George and his feelings about Lenny, how much he needs him. We learn quite a lot about Slim, that he's a good friend here, or the beginnings of a friendship. He's someone that you can confide in, talk to, trust. He's very well respected. Candy realizes that once Slim says the dog needs to die, that the dog's going to die. He holds that kind of power with the other men. And we learn about the life on the ranch for the hands that are living there. What it's like in the bunkhouse, the fact that all the men are forced to live together, and the dynamics that are occurring there. So I'm just going to take you a moment to think about how Steinbeck uses sound. This is something that I'd like you to consider in your story. These are some quotes. The thuds and occasional clangs of a horseshoe game. Voices raised in approval or derision. There was a clang of horseshoe on an iron stake. A little cheer of voices. It was silent outside. The silence came into the room, and the silence lasted. The silence fell on the room again. The silence fell on the room again. So there's a couple of repetitions there. So Steinbeck uses sound to create his atmosphere. And this is something to consider, particularly this section here. It was silent outside, the silence came into the room, and the silence lasted. That is happening when the men lead out Candy's dog to shoot it. And it's this awkward silence that's kind of suffocating the men who are inside. It's awkward, it's uncomfortable. And Steinbeck he never has to say, the men felt uncomfortable. He makes us feel that way through his use of language. So sound is going to be an important consideration for you. We've got the characterization of Slim. Slim's calm invitation to confidence. He has calm, godlike eyes. Slim's opinion were law. So I want you to take a moment to pause here and just jot down for yourself, what does this communicate to the audience about Slim? So have a look at these quotes and just a dot point in your notes. How are we positioned to feel about Slim based upon these? So pause now. So what I'm hoping that you wrote was something along the lines of Slim is respected. He's clearly calm, the fact that it's repeated here, an invitation to confidence. You can trust Slim, he's trustworthy, he's friendly. He's also respected and powerful, godlike eyes, opinions were law. So he's idolized by the other men. Okay. We've got some quotes here about the theme of loneliness. So quite a number of you have mentioned to me that you're going to be writing about Crooks, seems to be a fairly popular person, Curly's wife. I chose to write on Candy. For all of these characters, and indeed for everyone, loneliness is a key theme. Excuse me, my throat's a little bit dry. Okay. So look at how Steinbeck establishes loneliness. I hardly never seen two guys travel together. I just come in and get their bunk and work for a month and then they quit and go out alone. So this is telling us here of how most men live their lives. They just come to a ranch, sleep on some bunk that they're given for a month, and then they leave by themselves. So people are only staying in one spot for about a month. They're not making any connections and they come and go alone. George and Lenny are unusual. I hardly never seen two guys travel together. Look at this one. Never seem to give a damn about anybody. I ain't got no people. It's sad, the isolation, the lives that they're experiencing. This is what George says. I seen the guys that go around on ranches alone. They don't have no fun. They get mean. This is showing us why Lenny is so important for George. He has fun with Lenny. He's not mean, he's kind. He has someone to keep him company. Ranch with a bunch of guys on it ain't no place for a girl. This gives you an indication of Curly's wife. So have a think about when you're writing your story, what it must feel like to have nobody. And I mean, a lot of us at the moment are struggling with a bit of loneliness, aren't we? We're stuck at home, we're by us, with our families. Maybe you're an only child, or maybe you've got a sibling who's quite a bit older or younger than you, so you don't have that maybe companionship. Mum and dad are working. You can't see your friends, you can't see your grandparents, or anyone else who is important to you. I think that's giving, you guys are actually in a really unique situation to reflect on what is it feeling like right now to be lonely. So how must it feel for Curly's wife to be sitting in that house alone, no one to talk to because she's a girl. She's trapped. She's isolated, just like we are at the moment. So's Crooks. He sits in the barn in his own room because he's black, and the other people don't want him. They see him as less than them, separate. He belongs in the barn. The racism that he's experiencing. He's isolated, alone, separate. So use your own experience right now to try and get into the heads of these characters so that you can write about them. We've got some symbolism and foreshadowing. So symbolism and foreshadowing is like it's a warning or an indication of a future event. We've spoken a little bit about symbolism before. So we've got George stacked the cards and began to lay out his solitaire hand. He carefully built his line of solitaire cards. George laid out the deliberate solitaire hand. So this here is talking about chance, the fact that he's taking a chance, he's gambling, on this dream through playing this game of cards. He's carefully trying to build his dream, but ultimately it's still a chance. Look over here. Full rouged lips and wide-spaced eyes, heavily made up. Her fingernails were red. red mules on the insteps of which were bouquets of red ostrich feathers. So that's the initial introduction of Curly's wife. Well, he's seen a girl in a red dress. That was the girl that Lenny grabbed her dress in weed. He wants to touch everything. He reaches out to feel this red dress. So here, the idea of red is a symbol of passion and of danger. And so he's seeing these women, all of the women, the two women who are here, red, 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 red. It's an alarm bell. It's warning us that this is dangerous. And then we've got some foreshadowing here with the pup as well. He's got to sleep with his mother. You want to kill him? She's going to make a mess. There's going to be a bad mess about her. All right, so here we've got the idea that the pup's going to die. And here, we've got the idea that Curly's wife's going to be like the thing that creates all the problems. So throughout the whole book, Steinbeck is giving us clues of what's happening. Look at the use of repetition as well. And I tried to do this a little bit in my story. They get mean, he ain't mean, Lenny ain't a bit mean. Of course he ain't mean, he ain't mean. I can tell a mean guy a mile off. Looked down at the old dog, the ancient dog, an old dog, walked down and looked down at the dog. The old man, the old dog. The Skinner had been studying the old dog. That dog ain't no good. So look at all of this. He does it over and over to emphasize the points. I had him so long. I had him since he was pup. I had him too long. I had him from a pup. So we're getting the idea here that he builds tension by repeating. We've spoken about this one, the silence, creating tension. He lay back on his bunk and crossed his arms behind his head and stared at the ceiling. Candy lay rigidly on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Candy lay still, staring at the ceiling. Only Candy continued to stare at the ceiling. For a moment, he continued to stare at the ceiling, then he turned and faced the wall. This is beautifully written. It's repeating, 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 repeating. The dog dies and he switches off. He turns away. Very clever. Okay, so I want you to pause in a moment. Sorry, I'm going to give you another task. So I want you to think about how is Steinbeck's writing style establishing tension and foreshadowing a sense of doom. So we've discussed this here. And these are things that you're going to have to think about in your piece. How are you going to create tension? How are you going to emphasize a point? So through symbolism or through repetition. How are you going to create your mood? So you might be using the sounds that are being made and symbolizing things so that the reader can look into something without necessarily seeing it. So I want you in a moment to do a practice task. You can use either one of these two scenarios, and I want a small paragraph like I've done just here to build up, to practice using some of Steinbeck's stylistic techniques in a short piece of writing. Okay, so look what I've done here. As soon as I'd done it, I knew I was in trouble. A cold sensation swept through me and I felt my stomach drop to the ground. She was going to kill me. The cold lasted and lasted. It was silent. The only thing piercing the heavy air was the sound of my rapid breathing. Oh God, how was I going to get out of this? I raised my head up in despair, looking to the sky for an answer. I knew wouldn't come. The sun was setting and the sky was a hazy orange-red. I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears, the screeching sound of tires on the driveway. She was home. Okay, so this is just a quick sample that I did, but I've attempted to use some of Steinbeck's techniques that we've discussed. So I want you to have a go at that yourself. Do that on your OneNote. And then I want you to start thinking about your own story, and I want you to start writing the opening. Okay, so you should now know, you should have a plan for your story. You should understand your character really well, and we should know about some of Steinbeck's language techniques. So I want you to write the beginning of your story. You can do that, as I've said here, by either using descriptive language for your setting. Look at page 3 to 4 and page 19 to see how Steinbeck does it. Or you can be like me and choose to more look at the atmosphere, getting into your character's head. So start working on first the practice, and then I'd like you to have a go at beginning your own piece. Email me with any questions.